Hello. In 2015, I set up a supplement brand with very little money and no idea how to market it. I paid for a small ad in Men's Health magazine, and I was allowed to use their logo. And I did. Absolutely everywhere. And suddenly it took off like wildfire. I turned $8,000 of my savings into $1 million of revenue. It was stressful, exhausting, and I made loads and loads and loads of mistakes. I sold my startup in June 2022, and now I want to do it all over again, setting up another business, but this time with no money. In this series, I'm asking people who bootstrapped their own startup with very little investment, how did you make tens of millions of dollars? Today, I'm talking to Thomas Smale, the founder and CEO of FE International. FE International was founded with the mission to become the first investment bank for internet businesses. They advise on mergers and acquisitions and expect to reach $1 billion of revenue.
So when I started out in the industry, this was back in 2010, so 12 years ago. I was buying and selling small websites for myself, really small websites that were basically just a website, wasn't really making any money. Also, I was a student, so I didn't have much money. So I was buying these for $100, $200. Back then, what I was then doing is I was buying the website, finding ways for it to make some money. And we're not talking about thousands a month. We're talking about find a way to make $10, $20, $50. And then once I did that, I'd essentially repackage it and sell it. So I might have bought something for $300, found a way to get it making $50 a month, and then I would have sold it for $1,000 or $2,000 at the end of the month. The market back then was completely different than it is today. There was not really a mainstream marketplace you could go sell on. At that level, it would always be too small for like an M&A firm or a broker. And that was like my first money online. And then in 2010, I pivoted into courses, so teaching people how to buy and sell. That was quite successful for a while. And then off the back of the course, people with established businesses started coming to me and say, hey, Thomas, I've read your course about buying and selling businesses. Can you just sell my business for me? So that's how I got into M&A, which is what we do today. And the very early days was really just word of mouth, because there was not a FE International for selling your business. There was basically, you didn't really have a choice if you had an online business. Yeah, so back then there wasn't really social media. I mean, there was, I think, like maybe MySpace probably would have been the popular platform. I think Facebook was just about around then. But like web forums were everywhere, almost any, and they kind of still exist today. They're just not as popular. Any sub industry you could find, there would be a forum that existed for it. Just like today, I guess there's a YouTube channel or a Facebook group that exists for pretty much any industry you could think of. Back then, there'd be very specific forums. So what I was doing back then is I'd buy a really small business, join a relevant forum for that business, whatever it might be, build up a little bit of a reputation, just doing basic stuff like answering questions. I wouldn't be paying for advertising or anything like that. And then after a while, you could start to organically promote your business. So it might be like, oh, my website does X. So selling courses was exactly the same thing. I was just answering people's questions about buying and selling websites or businesses for free and just giving tips, which is kind of still what we do today. It's why I want to do YouTube interviews, podcasts, whatever it might be. It's exactly the same concept. It doesn't really go out of fashion. So answering people's questions, and then people came to me and said, I want to learn more about this. How do I find that? Hey, I have a course or a book or whatever you want to sign up for. It was either customers coming from that or word of mouth. So people telling their friends, being like, hey, you should check this out, or this is a good course, maybe you should learn. So we got a lot of referrals in the early days, and then even though we pivoted into M&A today, still a lot of our business is referrals as well.
If you're enjoying this content so far, please do subscribe. It really does help my channel, and feel free to give it a little bit of a thumbs up, because it boosts me on the YouTube algorithm. I don't really understand how it works, but it's certainly helping. I'm almost at 2,000 subscribers, which is just like so happy. Thank you.
So early days, I'd say the one thing about referrals is they really compound over time. If you do a good job and you start to build a good reputation, you start getting more and more referrals. And then the more people you've worked with and the more people that are happy with the work you've done, they will start telling more people. Hence why it compounds. So if you sell one business for one person, or you sell one course to one person, they like it, and they tell 5 friends, that's only 5 referrals. If you have 100 clients and they all tell 5 people, that's 500 referrals. And then if you can find ways to increase the likelihood of someone making a referral, which is usually quite simple, like asking them or incentivizing them, maybe you can increase that number by 20%. So your 500 referrals become 600. So it starts to compound. And then when it starts to compound, you can also do things to increase the number you're getting from existing customers. We've always found, particularly in this industry, like word of mouth or a high-end service, word of mouth is the most effective. Tested things like paid ads, for example. We found people are way less likely to sign up for a service where you're probably paying us 5 or 6 or maybe even 7 figures in fees. Much less likely you're going to decide to sign up off the back of an ad, but you might be significantly more likely if your friend or a peer or someone in your like a mastermind group or whatever had sold a business with us. So it sounds like a lazy answer, but the reality is things that work early on really can continue to compound. The key is being consistent and continuing to do the same thing. And if you can just make 1%, 2%, 5% improvements to things, as you scale, that compounds quite significantly. When you're early on and you have 10 customers and you make a 5% improvement, you're not really going to notice it. But if you have 1,000 customers or 1,000 leads or 1,000 anything, and you can increase it by 5%, you then have 1,050. It starts to compound quite nicely. So the reality is some things will forever work. And if you think about business over the years and you go back 10,000 years ago and how people were running businesses, it would have been word of mouth then as well. It's exactly the same today. So that's kind of what I found. It's always worked well. The very first thing to do before you even really start your strategy is figuring out what you're trying to achieve, because that really then starts to help dictate what the strategy is. So, and understanding what your business is worth today. So let's say you get a valuation, which you should do before you even start exit planning. From any good M&A firm like us, will provide a free valuation. So let's say your business today is worth $1 million, and you say, you personally think, oh, well, actually, I would like to sell my business for $10 million, then there's a certain type of plan that will help you get from 1 to 10. If you say, oh, I'd like to sell my business for $1.2 million, and you're at $1 million right now, then the plan is completely different going from 1 to 1.2 than it is going from 1 to 10 million. But if you at least have an understanding of what you're worth today and what you're trying to achieve, your strategy, your exit strategy is then dictated by where you're trying to get to and what that timeline might look like. So most people have some sort of value goal in mind. Some people just want to be millionaires. Some people want to pay off a house. Some people want to buy a house. If you're in the US, some people want to pay off college debt or medical debt or whatever it might be. Everyone has their own personal reasons why they're trying to achieve what they're trying to achieve. So the very first thing is understanding what you're worth today and where you're trying to get to. And then your strategy will really change. There's no one size fits all strategy. You then have to figure out what it's going to look like from a timing perspective, what you might have to do within your business to get to the level you want to. So if you're currently at $1 million, you're trying to get to 10, chances are you either have to wait quite a long time or do some things drastically different to get to that level. Whereas if you're currently at 1 million, you're trying to get to 1.2, chances are to get to 1.2 million, you probably don't really have to wait that long, and you might not even have to do that much different in your business. So the very fundamental point of an exit strategy is, what are you actually trying to achieve in the exit? If you're just blindly going in saying, I want to do an exit strategy because I want to sell my business one day, completely different spectrum of what you might need to do based on what you're trying to achieve as a outcome. Are you trying to diversify in terms of where they come from, or like what kind of cohort they're in? So maybe you have a product which is $20 a month and then the top end is $2,000 a month. Chances are what works to attract the $20 a month customer is not the same as the $2,000 a month customer. So I think first you need to think about the cohorts and who you're trying to target. And then you don't necessarily need to have lots of new traffic sources to scale, or you don't necessarily need to get customers from different sources. As we've already spoken about, you can get more customers from the same place just by doing a better job. And often that's easier because you already have something that's working. So let's use an example of like what we're doing right now on your YouTube channel. The solution to getting more subscribers to your YouTube channel in almost all cases is launching more videos. So instead of having one video a week, you might do one a day, or like two a week, and you'll start seeing that compounding effect. And then yes, I'm not a YouTube expert, but then there are other things you can do, like maybe a clearer call to action to get people to subscribe. So in most businesses, things that work at a very small scale will also work at a bigger scale. I think if you asked me this question 12 years ago, I would have said every good business should have 20 different sources of traffic or users or customers or whatever it might be. But I think in a small business, particularly if it's just you, or maybe have like a very small team, you should only really focus on like maybe 1 to 3 sources. I think the worst thing you can do is spend a little bit of time on everything, but never really get good at it. So, I'm going to try paid ads. But you try paid ads with $500 and it just doesn't go anywhere, and you say, okay, paid ads doesn't work. Or you do social media or YouTube, but you create a YouTube channel and you put 5 videos up and you leave it and you don't do anything again. Chances are that's just never going to be successful. But you might write it off and say, no, YouTube doesn't work in my industry, it sucks. But the reality is, the problem is the consistency. So I think it's always good to continue focusing on sources that are working, just find ways to scale them. And every source can be scaled more. In no small business would you have maxed out the number of referrals you can get, organic visits you can get, subscribers you can get, or whether that might feel like you've hit a bit of a wall in terms of like customer cohorts. Maybe if it's enterprise clients, you have to reach them in a slightly different way to the lower end clients, but that really depends on the business you have. So again, it's not like enterprise clients will only be acquired through cold calls or cold emailing or whatever. Maybe that will be an effective channel, maybe it won't. It's not a one size fits all for every business. And obviously I'm lucky, I'm fortunate. I see lots of successful businesses every day, and one thing I do know is that there's not really anything common between them, like one common channel of sales that works for everybody. It could work really well for one thing, could work really well for one business and not work at all for another.
Are there any particularly interesting businesses or particular niches or industries that you find are really attracting a lot of interest on FE International?
I mean, we have, again, I'm fortunate that we see lots of different businesses, and I find basically everything we ever represent interesting because it's always different. I'd say from a buyer perspective, like we have a real range of different businesses, and we really get interest in everything, which is our job. Our job is not to get, let's say we're representing 30 clients at any one time. Our job is not to get 10,000 inquiries to one business and then 2 inquiries to all the others. Our job is to get 1,000 inquiries on everything and have a consistent amount of interest in any kind of business. And I'd say one thing I found is that there really is a varied mix of interests out there. So there's not like and I don't think anyone should build a business around a business model they think is like trendy or sells for high multiples or chase a certain industry because it's popular. Because if you said that a couple of years ago, everyone would have said, yeah, crypto. And I've seen a lot of crypto related businesses recently, and you look at the P&L, yes, last year going up like that, and then this year are down to basically zero. If you chase that trend, I don't really know anything about crypto, so I'm not saying you should that industry's dead or anything like that, but it's quite clearly down this year. So if you had to chase that trend, whereas boring industries, think about things that were around 10 years ago, around 50 years ago, build something around that industry, still be around in 10, 50 years as well. So yes, chasing trends can be great. Any popular listing we have and we represent will always be making money and will always be cash flow positive, which is ultimately what investors are looking for. There's a lot of investors who really don't care what the business is as long as it's making money. So that's really the key. It's not the industry you're in. It's not how fancy your website it is. It's not your business model. It's making money and being profitable.
A question sort of linked in to when I was asking you about FE International. So I'm really interested in how you set your goals, because I read online that FE International consistently doubles its revenue. So I'm just interested in how you kind of go about goal setting.
Yeah, so every year we set goals for the next year. I'll say as we've grown, it gets consistently harder to keep growing at the same rate. So we look at it's got, I'd say, a lot more scientific. In the early days, it was like, let's just double revenue, easy target. We didn't really have a huge amount of overhead. That's fine. Now we have 7 figures going out in overhead, so we actually do need to plan better, or you end up with a business that is a complete mess if you're not planning for payroll, rent, all the other costs that you incur at running a service business at scale, hiring kind of smart people who are not cheap to hire. So we look at things like how many leads do we have coming in, and then we have a lot of data, like if we get an inquiry, how long does that take to how many inquiries turn into valuations, how many valuations turn into listings, how many listings will then sell as a percentage, how long does that take? So we generally start at the bottom of our funnel and look at what do we have lead wise, and then we look at all of our data around how long things take, and then we can then define what our target is for the next year, and then we then break that down by team into lots of different things. So our marketing team will have targets by channel, by week, which all really feeds into our annual target. So I think early on, when you're a small business, I wouldn't say you should definitely set a target, but I don't think you need to spend a huge amount of time worrying about how you get there. Like, often the answer is just get on with it and do the work. As you scale, you definitely need to get a little bit more scientific about it. So we look at tons and tons of different data points. We track everything. We'll always be aggressive with targets, but in a business like ours, because it often takes people time to get to know us, go through the process, decide they want to sell, we often have a pretty good idea what we're going to make next year already, just from our existing pipeline and people we're talking to. It's not like all the money we will make in, say, 2023 will come from leads we generate in 2023. The reality is some of it might come from someone we first met 5 years ago. They got a valuation, they were worth $1 million, they're now worth 10, and they want to sell in 2023, and they come back. So we have a very long, or can have a very long, life cycle like that.
Would you like to share any interesting or cool news or updates about FE International?
If you're in the industry and you're actively looking to buy and sell, we did just publish some mid-year reports for every business model, which gives an idea of like current demand, trends, and things like that. So definitely worth having a look and checking that out if you've not already. You can find it on our website. We have one for SaaS, we have one for e-commerce, content businesses, and you can also download all of them. And I think if you're a buyer, seller, or just someone who's casually interested in the industry, lots of good data in there, particularly because what's happening beginning of 2022 is completely different from the beginning of 2021, completely different from the beginning of 2020. So always worth, if you have a business, even if you're not planning on selling, keeping up with what's going on.
So what advice would you give to entrepreneurs who are thinking about starting their business?
So I think the first thing to do is like not get hung up on lots of things. Many people get stuck on things like, what does my website look like? What should the name be? What should the logo be? What legal stuff do I need to do? What should I call the company? Who should I get a bank account with? Like, yes, you probably need to do all of those things, but the reality is in the early days, you just need to launch something, start working on it, find out ways to make money, and then figure out how to go from there. I think most people that fail, I think, spend way too much time planning, and then you end up in this like paranoid circle of having no idea if it will work, so you never actually do it. Most people who are successful just try things. Chances are what you start with and what you launch is not actually going to be the thing that makes you money in future anyway. It might be similar. So for me, it was started with courses and then transitioned into actual M&A. So in most businesses, I'd say it's important to start building a reputation in the industry for being helpful. And then if a particular product you have or service you have isn't working, you can sell them something else. Whereas if you don't bother doing that, you don't build any reputation, no one's really following you, no one respects your opinion, whatever your main marketing channel might be, whether that's a YouTube channel, Facebook, your own blog, or whatever it might be, then it's going to be very difficult to get anything off the ground in any industry. So focus on being useful and having a readership, a viewership, a listenership, whatever it might be, and then you can kind of pivot and sell whatever you want.
Yeah.
Started off really early on selling courses. At the time I was a student, kind of needed ways to make extra money and pay rent. And then when I graduated in 2010, I decided that I wanted to run my own business and not be an employee. And I was like, well, now's a good time to do it. The economy back then, if you remember, was not particularly good.
Yeah.
Wasn't a very good year to graduate job wise. So I thought, well, if I'm going to do it, now is a good time. Because I had already had that like word of mouth and the popularity, started to get people who wanted help selling their business. And because I had no money, the only real option to make money was with a service business. I couldn't really launch a product because I didn't have any money to build it or find a supplier or whatever it was going to be. Couldn't build a software business because I don't know anything about, well, I do now, but I'm not technical, so I can't write code. I couldn't build it from nothing. So I guess a content business, so to speak, worked well, and that's essentially what we're doing, producing content for free. And the funnel was a course, and then the secondary funnel after that became selling your business. So all the kind of things we're talking about today are the kind of things that would have been talking about 12 years ago. I just have, I guess, significantly more experience now, but the fundamentals don't really change that much. So very early on, it was basically just me essentially selling my time. I was providing the service, my time. As the business started to compound, we started to get word of mouth. It meant we could hire people, and the business just kind of kept growing from there. Now we're well over, we do various things, not just M&A, but we have over 130 people worldwide. And that's really, I guess, taken 12 years to get there, but things do really compound over time. Yeah, so it sounds like a lazy answer, but we started early on. We started small. We started out just selling businesses. All we do today is sell businesses as well. We just do it at a much bigger scale, and ultimately we've stuck to it. It may be a good or a bad thing, but we've never really pivoted. We've just done the same thing. I think a lot of people start out and they kind of get bored or change their mind, or they get tired or whatever after a couple of years of doing one thing, whereas that was never really something that happened to me. So we just kept going.
I'd like to create some more entrepreneurial content sharing my kind of experience in this field. So please let me know if you have any questions, comments, feedback, good or bad. It's all welcome here. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.